Caffeine. The effect can be felt within minutes. Your mind feels sharper, more awake, almost instantly. Caffeine is found in coffee, tea, energy drinks, and soda, making it the most widely consumed stimulant in the world. This isn't about which drug is the strongest, but how quickly the brain can start depending on it on average. It works by blocking a chemical called adenosine, which normally builds up in the brain and makes you feel tired. When that signal is blocked, your brain shifts into a more alert state. At first, the effect feels consistent. What happens next is different. As use continues, the brain starts to adapt. It becomes more sensitive to adenosine, meaning the same amount of caffeine has less impact over time. That's why skipping your usual dose can lead to headaches, fatigue, and irritability. Compared to other substances on this list, caffeine dependence develops slowly, but it still shows how easily the brain can start relying on a chemical boost. Alcohol. The effect feels almost immediate. Muscles relax, thoughts slow down, and social pressure starts to fade. It doesn't feel dangerous at first. Alcohol works as a depressant, slowing activity in the brain and nervous system. This creates feelings of relaxation, reduced anxiety, and lowered inhibition, which is why it can make social situations feel easier. At first, the brain responds well to that calming effect. The shift begins when use becomes repeated. It begins to adjust, shifting the balance between calming and stimulating signals to compensate. As that balance changes, tolerance builds. The same amount no longer produces the same effect, leading to increased consumption over time. Eventually, the brain may start relying on alcohol to regulate stress and mood. Compared to stronger substances on this list, dependence usually develops more gradually. But once it forms, it can be very difficult to break. Cannabis. Some people say cannabis isn't addictive at all. Others say it's one of the hardest habits to quit. And the answer comes from how it affects the brain. Cannabis interacts with a system called the endocannabinoid system, which plays a role in mood, memory, appetite, and relaxation. The active compounds stimulate these receptors, often producing feelings of calm or mild euphoria. For many people, the effects feel relatively gentle at first. That's part of what makes it seem harmless. At the same time, with repeated use, the brain begins to adjust how this system works. Over time, it may reduce its own natural cannabinoid production, and when that happens, normal balance becomes harder to maintain without the drug. That's why stopping can lead to irritability, sleep disruption, or cravings. Compared to stronger substances, dependence usually develops more gradually, but it still shows how the brain can adapt to repeated stimulation. Nicotine. The effect can hit within seconds. A brief surge of relief, focus, or calm almost instantly. Nicotine is one of the most addictive substances known, largely because of how quickly it acts on the brain. It triggers a rapid release of dopamine, the chemical linked to reward and motivation. That sudden spike teaches the brain to associate nicotine with pleasure and stress relief. The effect doesn't last long, and that's the problem. That short cycle is where the pattern begins. As the feeling fades, the brain starts craving another dose to bring it back. With repeated use, this loop strengthens. Over time, nicotine changes how the brain regulates dopamine, making normal activities feel less rewarding without it. Because the cycle happens so quickly, dependence can form faster than many people expect. Benzodiazepines. For someone dealing with intense anxiety, the relief can feel almost immediate. Medications like Xanax or Valium, known as benzodiazepines, are often used to treat anxiety, panic attacks, or insomnia. And the way they calm the brain can lead to dependence faster than many people expect. They work by increasing the activity of a neurotransmitter called GABA, which slows down brain activity and creates a strong sense of relaxation or sedation. At first, that calming effect feels like control returning. At the same time, with repeated use, the brain begins to adjust. It reduces its own natural GABA activity in response. As that shift happens, the body starts relying on the medication to maintain balance. Without it, the brain can swing in the opposite direction. That's why stopping suddenly can lead to intense anxiety, restlessness, or even panic. And because this adjustment happens quickly, dependence can form sooner than most people realize. Prescription opioids. The relief can feel almost instant. Pain fades and a sense of calm takes its place. Prescription opioids like oxycodone or hydrocodone are used to treat severe pain by binding to opioid receptors in the brain. These receptors reduce pain signals and create strong feelings of relief and relaxation. For someone recovering from injury or surgery, that effect can feel necessary. At the same time, it doesn't just stop at pain relief. These drugs also activate the brain's reward system. That combination changes how the experience is remembered. Relief becomes something the brain wants to repeat. With continued use, the brain begins to expect the drug to maintain normal comfort levels. As tolerance builds, higher doses are needed to reach the same effect. And for some people, that's where the pattern shifts. What started as treatment can turn into dependence and sometimes leads to stronger opioids over time. Cocaine. The effect hits almost immediately. A sudden surge of energy, confidence, and euphoria floods the brain. Cocaine dramatically increases dopamine, the chemical linked to motivation, pleasure, and reward. Instead of a normal release, it causes dopamine to spike far beyond natural levels. That intensity is what makes the experience feel so powerful. The brain registers it as something worth repeating. The effect doesn't last long, and when it fades, the drop is just as noticeable. That drop matters. That sharp rise and fall creates a strong cycle. The brain remembers the high and starts seeking it again. With repeated use, this cycle begins to disrupt the brain's normal reward system. Everyday activities like food, exercise, or social interaction can feel less satisfying in comparison. As that happens, the desire for cocaine can grow stronger with each use. Methamphetamine. The surge of energy can feel almost unstoppable. Focus sharpens, fatigue disappears, and the effect can last far longer than expected. Methamphetamine affects multiple brain chemicals at once. It releases large amounts of dopamine while also increasing levels of norepinephrine and serotonin. That combination creates intense energy, focus, and euphoria. What happens next is different. It doesn't just come from stimulation, it also changes how the brain functions over time. With repeated use, methamphetamine can begin damaging the brain's dopamine-producing cells. As that damage builds, the brain becomes less able to experience pleasure naturally. When the drug is absent, the result can be severe fatigue, depression, and intense cravings. And because the effects are both powerful and long-lasting, dependence can develop extremely quickly. Heroin. The effect can feel like an instant wave of relief. Pain fades, tension disappears, and a powerful sense of calm takes over. Heroin enters the brain very rapidly, where it converts into morphine and binds to opioid receptors throughout the brain and nervous system. These receptors control both pain and reward signals. That's what creates the intense rush often associated with the drug. The brain doesn't stay the same for long. It begins adapting to that artificial signal. Natural opioid production decreases while tolerance to the drug increases. As that shift happens, the brain starts relying on heroin just to feel normal. And when the drug is absent, withdrawal can begin quickly. That cycle of relief followed by withdrawal is what traps the brain, driving repeated use. And that's why heroin addiction can develop so quickly. But one substance changes everything about how fast addiction can happen. Fentanyl. The amount needed is almost invisible. Just a few tiny grains can have a powerful effect on the brain. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid originally developed for medical pain management, but it is far more potent than most other opioids. Even in extremely small amounts, it can produce intense effects on the brain's pain and reward systems. Like other opioids, it binds to receptors that create feelings of relief and sedation. Because of its potency, those signals happen very quickly and with unusual intensity. The brain rapidly learns to associate the drug with powerful relief and pleasure. As that pattern repeats, it can begin relying on that signal to maintain normal balance. Compared to every other substance on this list, fentanyl can lead to dependence extremely quickly. And that speed is what makes it one of the most dangerous drugs in the world. Addiction isn't always about how strong a drug feels. Sometimes it's about how quickly the brain learns it can't function without it.